Joining me today is John Libman.
So normally when I'm connecting with somebody, the first couple questions I get is, I'm green, I don't know what to do. This person told me to call you. They said that you'll be able to give me advice, roadmap. They don't know what to say on the other line.
Right.
So that's usually the first conversation we're having. So I'm like, okay, perfect, right? So then we just start educating, right? I think that's where you start, okay? Basic questions, right? Let's just get on like a process when we're talking about having this call is, hey, do you rent? Or do you live at home right now? What do you pay for rent?
Definitely education. I feel that consumers out there, they're listen to a lot of people like friends and family, and I understand that's a comfort level, and I think we all are guilty of that at some point as consumers.
Yeah.
We ask our family, we ask our friends, like, hey, have you ever done this before? What's the feedback? What do you think about this, right? So they're asking these things to people that they trust, but those people might not necessarily have the right answers or enough experience to give them, the consumer, enough information to make a decision that's best for them. Maybe their friend or family member only purchased, a couple homes in their life, right? So you're only gonna get so much experience out of a transaction or two, right? The beginning of their journey is searching online, whether they're going to Zillow, like they're shopping first.
Yep.
And then-
It's like buying a car. Where do you go first? You step on a lot. Right? Like that's when you start looking at cars, right? It's the same concept.
So they don't necessarily start talking to a lender right away or do their budget, but I think it's important for them to kind of analyze their own budget that they have now.
Agreed.
What are they bringing in for income? What are they paying out every month? What does that look like?
Yeah.
What's their debt now? What can they afford? And that's where the whole affordability comes in. So when they meet with you, you kind of go over this.
Yeah, because remember, we're qualifying somebody based on a debt ratio, right? It's gross income divided by monthly debt. Now, the monthly debt that we're accounting for, unless you're doing like a veteran loan or something like that, is mostly everything that's on the credit report, okay? So on a credit report, it's your minimum obligation on a credit card. So if I have a $2,000 balance on a credit card, the minimum payment might be $75. That's my monthly debt. You might pay actually more at that, but that's what I count as debt.
Right.
Your car loan payment or your car lease payment, that's my debt.
Right.
Student loan payment, that's my debt. And then whatever the mortgage is that we're projecting is going to be, right? So, but that's not all your expenses. Budget and where you qualify for, two different numbers. It's a constant comparable, like why rent when you can buy, right? Or you're paying your landlord's rent. I mean, this is like, it's always like these things that we say. I ran a quick little just breakdown off of estimates that we've seen over the last 6-12 months on rates, things like that. If someone was buying roughly a $400,000 property, and putting down, say, 5%, estimating what tax and insurance may be on that, you might be looking at somewhere between, $3,100 to $3,300, depending on what those taxes and insurance might be. Over a 5-year window, you're gonna pay down $22,000, $23,000 on that mortgage, right? So now I owe, say, $358,000, $357,000 over that time frame, where I started maybe at $380,000.
Right.
Where I've made all those mortgage payments, but also my property that I own has appreciated 5%, whatever that number is over that time frame. So what did I really gain in that ownership compared to renting, where if you paid $3,000 a month over 5 years, I mean, you've invested what, $180,000 in payments, and you don't own anything.
Maybe you can explain to the self-employed buyer, like what's important about, how to keep their books straight, like what they're going to need from you to make that process easier for them to qualify.
Yeah, I think it's depending on the type of self-employed, right? So you have some people that are just filing a Schedule C, which is on your personal returns. Sometimes you have people with S corps, or you have corporations. But normally the first question is usually, how long have you been in the business? That's it. Most of those people will have an accountant. If you don't have an accountant, I definitely recommend it. Especially you're looking to buy in the upcoming years and you're self-employed, having an accountant or a bookkeeper, someone that's gonna have this organized, I think there's a lot of value there. The other part too is a lot of times we want letters from them referencing that you've been in the business for X amount of time frame and they've been the ones filing your tax returns. So there's a piece of that too, but also you're just kind of double checking yourself to make sure that you're doing it correctly if you're self-employed. But we're gonna usually grab those federal returns. We don't really don't want the state as much, right? So it's gonna be like your federal business returns, like if they're corporate, S Corp, then you'll get sometimes in scenarios, you'll get these things called K1s. It's kind of like a W-2 sometimes for, a self-employed borrower. So you'll get those too. And then, hey, remember, there's also people in certain businesses that claim tips. That's another thing that people, actually in the last year, gifts have become easier, especially with government-based loans, where they actually look at the gift tracing similar to conventional financing, which it was a little more difficult previous to that.
How does a gift work?
So, all right, let's say I'm your brother, right? and I'm gonna give you $10,000, right? One, I wanna be able to trace this entire process. We gotta show, hey, we have a relationship. That's the first part, right? Right, we're family, okay? The other part too is we have this gift letter, right? It's a generic Word document gift letter. Any lender you deal with, they all have this generic gift letter, right? Gift letters, name people, who's involved, don't need to pay it back. It's all kind of on this letter, right? In the easiest way to trace it is me giving you a personal check for $10,000, then you cashing it in your bank account, right? Now, once it clears my account, I can view an image of this check. We call it a canceled check, similar to like when someone makes a deposit on a mortgage, right? When they're trying to buy a house, right? So we get an image of this check, and depending age demographics, sometimes people don't have checks anymore, right? But if you ever write a utility check, it's the check you see at the back of your bank statements. We're looking for that check. So this plus your bank statement receiving the funds plus this gift letter. Done.
If you're looking at a property that has leases in place, let's say they have 6 months left on the lease, and the rent is less than market value,
we do, yeah. So one, if you're buying a property that you're going to be occupying, a unit has to be vacant. When you close, that's a really big piece of the puzzle. If there are current rentals and lease agreements that are signed, unfortunately, the appraiser is going to have to honor those lease agreements when we're doing the qualification. So there are a lot of properties that are turning over that maybe this person's been there for 15 years and they really haven't increased their rent. They're paying peanuts, and it really should be double this number. And that new person coming in is like, I'm doubling this number in the next 12 months, but we can't use it yet when we're qualifying. So that's why it's really important dealing with like an expert like yourself. You're reaching out to the listing agent, finding out, hey, what is going on with the lease agreements? So we're not finding something out last minute, right? Yeah. Now, when we were talking about investment, the other thing we should kind of talk about a little bit is, the Airbnbs have become that kind of second home situation has kind of popped up a lot in the last couple of years. So I've found a lot of people kind of getting closer to retirement are now buying like this property down the Cape. They're buying the property down Narragansett. They're buying them in New Hampshire, and they're buying these properties. They're financing wise, almost think of it like an investment property. You got to put down your 20-25%, right? Because it's a second home or it's an investment property. But if you're now renting it out to help offset that cost structure, people are doing that because their goal play long-term in the next 5 years is to eventually retire and move to that location. I've seen a lot of people doing that lately too, right? Credit scores drive a couple things. They drive the interest rate at times, they drive the program at times, and they drive the mortgage insurance, right? So private mortgage insurance, or PMI, is associated with loans when we don't put 20% down, right? And in most conventional loans, there's a risk to that. So it's insurance, right? Just like you got a car, right? It's insurance, it's based on risk. So if you don't have a strong credit score, that monthly premium might be higher on that PMI or mortgage insurance, right? So it does play into it too with the credit scores. Seller credits, they've come back, right? All this stuff disappeared for like 5 years, right? But you're seeing people getting home inspections again, which is great. You're seeing people getting seller credits now to help offset the cost. Every $10,000 on a mortgage may only move the payment about $60 to $70 a month, right? So a lot of times when you make an offer on a house, you could actually increase the sales price a little bit and roll in a seller credit. That seller credit, it's a paper math transaction. But what will end up happening is it will lower your cash to close. Closing costs, if I'm buying a $100,000 house or I'm buying a $500,000 house, only a couple things actually adjust. Mostly it's title insurance is the biggest thing that's going to change, which ends up being through the attorney, and then whatever your taxes and insurance is on that property. The other cost structures are very, very similar. A lot of people use between like a 2 to 3% of the sales price. If you've ever heard that, like 2 to 3% of your sales price is roughly what the cost is, but everything is so different per person. So I think if we're talking to somebody, it's better to really give the guidance when we speak to somebody on the phone, right, about what that would be. Most people say the average is anywhere between $4,500 to $5,500, as an idea, right? But really, until you get actual numbers on somebody, you can't be really 100% accurate on that. The other part is that we normally escrow your taxes and insurance. So when we're escrowing, what that means is that when you pay your mortgage payment, you pay your principal and interest payment, you pay your taxes, insurance, if you have mortgage insurance, and then you got your total payment, right? But taxes are paid quarterly in a town, and insurance is paid annually. So what ends up happening is at closing, we actually collect 12 months of insurance to pay a year ahead. We collect a quarter of taxes, pay it ahead. And then we set up 3 months of insurance, 2 months of taxes, and set up this little kitty over here.
Yeah.
Right, so this kitty, every month when I pay my $3,000 mortgage payment, tax and insurance go into this account. And we pay taxes quarterly out of there, and we pay the insurance annually. So depending on what tax and insurance are on that property, you could be adding another 3 to 5 grand to this number. Right, so that's why it's kind of a moving target. But it's a really good idea if you talk to somebody like yourself or myself, we can break it down a little bit more in depth for somebody, but you can roll those costs in too. I mean, any additional questions that someone might have, you can direct message us. Our Instagram account's john.libman, as well as our website is localmortgageteam.com.
And to get a hold of me and the Gavere Real Estate Team, you can reach out to our website, thegavererealestateteam.com. And also our Instagram, TikTok is all the same Gavere Team as well.